All right, let's dive into another deep dive. This time we're heading over to Indonesia.
Oh, Indonesia.
Yeah, to unpack this pretty wild public divorce
Okay.
of Baim and Paula Verhoeven.
Oh, wow.
Now, these two, they're like A-listers over there.
Okay, yeah.
So think like Brangelina level famous.
I got.
So for this deep dive, we've got this article from Insert Live.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big Indonesian news outlet.
Okay.
And even the headline's like straight out of soap opera.
Oh, really?
It says, Baim beberkan bukti di sedang cerai, mata sembab Paula Verhoeven jadi sorotan.
Okay, well, I don't speak Indonesian.
Yeah, no worries, I'll translate. It basically means Baim reveals evidence in divorce hearing. Paula Verhoeven's swollen eyes steal attention.
Oh, so there's drama.
Oh, yeah, tons.
Okay.
Now, for those who aren't familiar with Indonesian celeb gossip,
Yeah.
Baim and Paula, they're like the picture-perfect couple. You know,
Right.
big on social media, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, I see. So this divorce is kind of shattering that perfect image.
Exactly, and that's what's making this whole thing even more shocking.
I get it. It's like when Brad and Angelina split.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone was stunned.
Hmm.
So this article, it dives right into the latest court hearing, which was all about Baim presenting his evidence.
Okay, his side of the story.
Yep, and let me tell you, he came prepared.
Oh, really? Like what kind of evidence did he bring?
So according to his lawyer, a guy named Fahmi Bakmid, they submitted a ton of stuff, like 40 pieces.
Wow, 40.
Yeah, and we're not just talking like paper documents.
Right.
They also brought in electronic evidence, including conversations.
Oh, conversations, huh? That could be juicy.
Right, like what kind of bombshells are hidden in those texts and emails.
Exactly. It's like getting a peek behind the curtain of their seemingly perfect life.
Totally. And the article says Baim looked super relieved after presenting it all, like a weight had been lifted.
Interesting.
Makes you think, what was he carrying around? Was he feeling misrepresented? Or maybe he finally felt like he got to tell his side.
Could be both, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's tough when your personal life becomes public fodder.
Totally, especially when you're used to controlling your narrative.
Yeah, exactly. And then it gets even juicier. There are reports of, like, a mini outburst in the courtroom.
Oh, no way!
Yeah. And to top it off, Paula was seen leaving the court totally distraught,
Oh, wow.
like visibly upset, crying.
Jeez, that's intense.
It really shows the emotional toll this is all taking.
Absolutely.
Even for celebrities, divorce is never easy.
Nope. And you know what adds another layer to all of this?
What's that?
The Indonesian legal system.
Oh, right.
Like, how does divorce even work over there? Is it like here in the States?
That's a great question. And it's key to understanding this whole case.
Yeah.
Indonesia's legal system, it's a mix of influences.
Oh, okay.
You've got civil law, Islamic law, and even customary law.
Whoa, that's a lot to unpack.
It is, and it can make things pretty complex, especially for high-profile couples like this.
So where do we even begin? Like, what are the basics we need to know about Indonesian divorce law?
Well, first off, remember that Indonesia's population is mostly Muslim.
Right.
So Islamic law, or Sharia, has a big influence on family matters, including divorce.
So religious beliefs can actually affect the outcome of a divorce case.
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
In some instances, religious courts even handle the divorce proceedings.
So it's not just about legal stuff, it's about religious interpretations and cultural norms, too.
Exactly.
Man, this just got way more complicated.
It did, didn't it? And then you add in the media scrutiny and public opinion.
Yeah, it's like a recipe for a legal drama.
Totally. Forget Netflix. This is real-life drama unfolding right in front of us.
Okay, before we go too deep into the legal and cultural stuff, I want to go back to the article for a sec.
Okay.
It mentions Paula didn't comment after the hearing.
Yeah, I can't imagine facing a pack of reporters after that emotional roller coaster.
Right. And speaking of the media, Indonesian news outlets are having a field day with this divorce.
I bet.
I mean, they're analyzing every detail, every facial expression, every cryptic social media post.
It's like they're trying to piece together a puzzle.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how much does all this media attention actually affect the legal stuff? Does public opinion carry any weight in the courtroom?
That's a really good question, and it's tough to say for sure.
Right.
In theory, the court should be impartial,
Yeah.
basing their decisions on the evidence.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's hard to completely ignore public opinion, especially in a case this big.
So it's like we're watching a real-life legal drama unfold, but with this added layer of media scrutiny and cultural consideration?
Absolutely. It's way more complex than it first appeared.
Okay, so let's dive into those next.
Right.
First, I want to understand what kind of evidence could actually make or break this case.
Okay.
We've got these mysterious conversations. What could they reveal? And what legal strategies might each side use?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting. Remember, Indonesian divorce laws can be very specific.
Okay.
And what's considered strong evidence can vary depending on why they're getting divorced.
So what are the most common reasons for divorce in Indonesia? And what evidence would they need?
Well, one of the most common, especially for Muslim couples, is shikak.
Shikak.
Yeah, it basically means irreconcilable differences.
Okay, so like they just can't get along?
Kinda, but it's more than just a few arguments. You have to show a fundamental breakdown in the relationship.
I see.
Enough conflict that it's impossible for them to live together peacefully.
So like constant fighting, separate bedrooms, that sort of thing?
Yes, but often it goes deeper than that.
Okay.
You might have family or friends testifying about constant bickering, lack of communication.
Gotcha. So it's about proving the relationship itself is toxic.
Exactly. And that's where those conversations could come in.
Oh, right.
Imagine text messages full of arguments or expressing unhappiness.
Ooh, that would be a bombshell.
Right.
Like we're seeing the raw emotions behind their public image.
Exactly. And those conversations, depending on what they say, could be pretty strong evidence for shikak.
Okay, so shikak is one reason. Are there others that might be relevant here?
Oh, yeah. Another common one, especially for couples married under civil law, is perselingkuhan,
Which means,
adultery.
oh, the classic infidelity angle.
Yep. And to prove that one, you need solid evidence.
Right, like more than just rumors.
Exactly. You'd need photos, videos, eyewitnesses.
Wow, so basically catching them in the act.
Pretty much. Or at least strong enough evidence to suggest it happened.
Okay, so we've got shahak and adultery.
Mm-hmm.
Any other reasons for divorce that we should be aware of?
Well, there's also keserai talak.
What's that?
It's divorce initiated by the husband.
Wait, so he can just decide to divorce her just like that?
It's a bit more nuanced than that.
Okay.
Under Islamic law, the husband can pronounce talak, which is like a declaration of divorce.
Oh, I see.
But there are procedures and conditions that need to be met.
So he can't just snap his fingers and end the marriage.
Right. The court still has to review everything and make sure everything was done properly.
So talak is more like a legal mechanism that gives him the right to start the process.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got shikak, adultery, and talak.
Yep.
Any other reasons for divorce in Indonesia?
There are a few more, but those are probably the most relevant in this case, at least based on what we know so far.
Okay, so it sounds like Baim and Paula have a lot of legal avenues they could pursue.
Right.
And with all this evidence flying around, it's anyone's guess how this will all shake out.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so fascinating. It's like a legal thriller unfolding.
Right. We've got the drama, the intrigue, the high stakes.
And don't forget the cultural nuances.
Oh, yeah, those add another layer of complexity to this whole thing.
For sure. We can't forget this is all happening within a specific cultural context, one that really values family, tradition, and harmony.
So how do you think these cultural values might influence how this divorce plays out?
Well, for starters, there's a lot of emphasis on keeping a good public image.
Right, especially for celebs like Baim and Paula.
Exactly. I can imagine the pressure to handle this gracefully.
You avoid any scandals.
Yep. And there's this strong expectation, especially in traditional Indonesian society, that couples will try to reconcile,
Oh, interesting.
to try and save the marriage.
So even though they're in the middle of this public divorce, there's still pressure to work things out.
Absolutely. Divorce, especially for high-profile people, can be seen as a failure.
Wow.
Not just for them, but for their families and their communities.
So it's not just about them, it's about upholding social norms.
Exactly. And that adds a whole other layer to their decision-making.
Man, this is getting really interesting. It's like we're peeling back layers of cultural norms and social pressures.
It is. And we haven't even talked about the media's role yet.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Indonesian media, they love a good celebrity scandal. And they're not afraid to get into the nitty-gritty details.
Yeah, it's like they're adding fuel to the fire, turning this personal thing into a national spectacle.
And that media attention, it can really sway public opinion, which, as we talked about, can sometimes influence the legal process.
So it's like this tangled web of legal stuff, cultural expectations, and media frenzy.
Exactly. And that's what makes this case so fascinating. It's a window into Indonesian society.
Okay, before we get lost in the weeds here, let's recap what we've learned so far.
Okay.
We've got this high-profile divorce with Baim and Paula, these huge celebs, at the center.
We've seen evidence, high emotions, and glimpses of the legal and cultural factors.
And the outcome, well, that's still up in the air.
For sure.
But we do know it's not just about legal stuff. It's about religion, cultural values, and social pressures.
And let's not forget the media. They're amplifying every detail of this.
All right, so now that we got the basics, let's dive deeper into those cultural nuances.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about how Indonesian society views divorce, especially when it involves such high-profile people.
Great place to start. Indonesian society, as we've touched on, puts a lot of emphasis on family unity. In harmony, divorce is often seen as a last resort.
So even though it's legal, there's still a stigma attached to it.
Absolutely.
And for celebrities, that stigma is probably even stronger.
Oh, yeah. They're often held to a higher standard.
So it's like they're not just dealing with their own stuff.
Right.
They're facing potential backlash from fans, their communities, their families.
Exactly. It's a lot of pressure.
Okay, so let's talk about that pressure for a sec. We know Indonesian media love a good scandal.
Oh, they do?
They're not shy about digging into people's lives. How do you think that's affecting Baim and Paula right now?
Well, they're definitely under a microscope. Every move, every word is being analyzed by the media.
It's like they're living in a fishbowl.
Exactly. And that can take a huge toll.
Especially on top of going through a divorce.
It can. It can.
So it's not just a divorce, it's a very public, very messy, very scrutinized divorce.
You got it.
And that public scrutiny can sometimes lead to trial by media.
Oh, that's a good point.
Where public opinion starts to weigh in before all the facts are even out.
Exactly. And that's one of the dangers of a high-profile divorce like this.
Right.
It's hard to get a fair hearing when public opinion is already so strong.
So it's like they're fighting two battles, one in court and one in the court of public opinion.
Precisely. And both can be exhausting.
Okay, so we've talked about the stigma and the media scrutiny, but I'm curious about the role of family in all of this.
Okay.
How do families typically respond to divorce in Indonesia?
Well, family in Indonesia, it's everything.
Right.
It's the foundation of society.
So I'm guessing divorce isn't something they take lightly?
Not at all. It's seen as a threat to that family unit.
So how do families usually react when a couple decides to divorce?
It depends the family.
Okay.
Some might be more accepting, especially if they see the couple's unhappy. But often families try to mediate,
Oh, really?
encourage the couple to work things out.
But what if they're set on getting divorced?
Then it can get tough.
Yeah.
Family pressure can be huge, especially in a culture that values unity so much.
So they're not just dealing with their own emotions and the legal stuff, they're also dealing with their families.
Exactly. And that adds another layer of complexity.
Okay, so let's talk about the kids for a minute.
Right.
We know Baim and Paula have 2 young children. How does Indonesian society typically view custody in divorce cases?
Traditionally, the kids went to the mother.
So mom's the primary caregiver?
Yes, that was the common view.
Okay.
But lately, there's been a move towards shared custody,
Oh, interesting.
where both parents are involved.
That makes sense.
It's a slow shift, but it's happening.
And there are legal reforms happening to support that.
Exactly.
So how do you think public opinion of Baim and Paula might be affected by how they handle custody?
In a culture that values family so much, their choices will definitely impact their image.
Right.
If they fight over custody, it could hurt their reputations.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Indonesians generally don't like when parents put their own needs above their kids.
So there's a lot at stake here.
There is.
It's not just about their relationship. It's about their image and their standing within Indonesian society.
It is, and it's also about setting an example for other couples.
Right. Their actions could influence social norms around divorce and custody.
Exactly. This case is fascinating because it's a window into how Indonesian values are changing.
Okay, before we wrap up this part, let's circle back to the source material.
Sounds good.
Besides that article, we also got some other things, links to their profiles, articles about Baim's businesses, even a random video.
Yeah, I was curious about those.
It's always interesting to see what else is provided.
Right, even if it doesn't seem directly related.
So the profiles, obviously we know they're famous, but looking at them, you realize just how huge they are in Indonesia.
Right.
Millions of followers, brand deals. It's like a glimpse into their curated public image.
The image that's now being challenged by all of this.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder how much of what we see online is real.
Right, how much is staged.
Like, this divorce is pulling back the curtain, showing us the reality behind that perfect facade.
That contrast is always fascinating to people. It's like we're seeing the human side of these larger-than-life figures.
Totally. And speaking of human side, let's talk about those articles about Baim's businesses.
Hmm.
Now, I'm no financial expert, but he's got his hands in a lot of different things.
Oh, really?
Real estate, tech startups, even a YouTube channel with millions of subscribers.
Wow, he's built quite the empire.
He has, but here's the thing. The articles don't mention Paula at all.
That's interesting.
It's all about Baim's successes, his ventures.
It makes you wonder about their relationship. Were their finances separate?
Exactly. It raises more questions than it answers.
It does. And it makes me want to hear Paula's side of the story even more.
Me too. We've heard all about Baim, but what about her? What are her motivations?
What are her hopes and fears going through all of this?
Right. It feels like we're missing half the picture.
We are. And that's one of the most compelling parts of this whole case. It's a reminder that every story has multiple sides.
And that it's important to hear all of them before making judgments.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the profiles, the business articles, and then there's this video.
Right, the video.
And honestly, I'm not sure what to make of it.
Oh.
It's a clip of Baim pranking Paula.
Okay.
It just feels so out of place.
Sometimes sources include things that aren't immediately relevant, but offer clues.
So you think there's a reason this video was included?
It's possible. Maybe it's meant to show us something about their relationship.
Like the dynamic.
Yeah, or their sense of humor.
Okay.
Or maybe it's a distraction.
Ooh, a distraction, like a red herring.
Maybe. It's hard to say at this point.
We need more context.
We do.
All right, so we've got this stack of sources, the article, the profiles, the business stuff, and this mysterious video.
It's like a puzzle.
It is, and we're still missing some pieces.
And that's the beauty of a deep dive.
Right.
It's about exploring the nuances, the questions.
And accepting that we might not have all the answers away.
Exactly. The journey is just as important as the destination.
Well said. So as we wrap up this part of our dive, what are some key questions we should keep in mind?
I think one of the biggest is, what will Paula's response be to all of this?
Right. We need to hear her side.
Will she challenge Baim's claims? Will she bring her own evidence?
So many questions. I can't wait to dive deeper in our next segment.
Me neither. This is shaping up to be a truly fascinating case.
It really is. All right, folks, that's it for part 1 of our deep dive into this divorce.
We've unpacked a lot of information, looked at the cultural and legal landscape, and raised some key questions.
And in part 2, we'll continue to explore all of this.
We encourage you to stay tuned and join us as we delve deeper.
See you in part 2.
Welcome back. Ready to dig deeper into this Indonesian divorce?
You bet. It's like we've just scratched the surface of this whole thing.
We have. And you know that random video we talked about?
The one with the prank.
Yeah, they got me thinking about how couples, especially famous ones, present themselves online.
Oh, interesting. You're connecting that video to their public image.
Exactly. They've built careers on being this adorable, relatable pair.
Right. All over social media, the perfect family life.
And that's why this divorce is such a shock. It's like that illusion is breaking.
Totally. And that video, it adds another layer to this whole story.
It does, doesn't it?
Like, is it a real glimpse into their relationship or just a performance for the cameras?
Exactly. How much of what we see from celebrities online is actually genuine?
Right. It's easy to forget that everyone has their own struggles.
They do. And when those struggles become public, it can be jarring for fans.
Totally. It's like this divorce is making everyone reevaluate what they thought they knew about Baim and Paula.
It is. It reminds us that things aren't always what they seem, especially in the world of celebrities.
And that brings us back to public opinion and how it might affect this whole case.
Right. We were talking about how Indonesian media loves a good scandal.
They do.
And they really dig into people's lives.
So how do you think all this attention is affecting how the public sees Baim and Paula?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's likely that opinions are getting more divided.
How so?
Well, some people might side with Baim, seeing him as the one who was wronged.
Right, like he was pushed to this point.
And others might feel for Paula, especially after seeing how upset she was in court.
Yeah, and then there are those who might be disillusioned with both of them.
Exactly, feeling like the image they projected wasn't real.
It's like this divorce is a Rorschach test for Indonesian society.
It is. Everyone's projecting their own interpretations onto it.
So we've got the media frenzy, public opinion swirling, and then the actual legal proceedings happening at the same time.
A lot.
What legal strategies do you think Baim and Paula might be using?
Well, for Baim, it seems like he's trying to present himself as the victim, like he was forced into this.
Right.
All that evidence, especially those conversations, suggests he's building a case for shitcock.
Irreconcilable differences.
Exactly. He's saying the relationship is too broken to fix.
And by showing how relieved he was, he's trying to look like he's free from a burden.
Exactly. It's not just about the evidence. It's about controlling how people see him.
So it's about shaping the narrative.
Exactly. And for Paula, we haven't seen her strategy yet.
Right.
But based on her reaction in court, she's probably feeling hurt, maybe betrayed.
It makes you wonder, what will she do?
Will she fight back against Baim's claims? Will she present her own evidence?
Those are the questions we'll be looking for answers to.
Her legal team has to be careful, though.
Oh, yeah.
They need to think about the cultural context, public opinion, and how their actions could affect her image.
It's a high-stakes game.
It is. They're playing chess on a very public stage.
And the stakes are high, not just for them personally, but for their careers and their standing in society.
Exactly. This is about way more than just dividing assets or figuring out custody.
All right, so let's zoom out for a minute.
Okay.
What are some of the bigger implications of this whole case?
That's a big question.
Like, how might it affect Indonesian society, celebrity culture, or even the legal system?
Well, this case, because it's so high profile, could set a precedent for how future celebrity divorces are handled.
So their actions now could have a ripple effect.
Exactly. And one area where we might see that is in child custody arrangements.
Right. Indonesian society is slowly moving towards shared custody.
And this case could speed that up.
Whoa, how so?
If Baim and Paula choose shared custody, it could normalize that idea for other couples.
So they're unintentionally becoming role models.
In a way, yes. And the media will be watching closely to see how it all unfolds.
It's like we're seeing a cultural shift happening in real time.
We are. This divorce is sparking conversations about family, gender roles, and relationships.
And it's all playing out on this very public stage.
It is, and that's what makes this deep dive so compelling. It's not just about gossip, it's about exploring deeper issues.
Okay, before we move on to our last part, I want to touch on something. We've talked a lot about the legal and cultural aspects, but we can't forget that this is about two people going through a painful experience.
You're absolutely right.
It's easy to get caught up in the drama, but we need to remember the human side of this story.
Exactly. These are real people with real emotions.
And we need to approach this with empathy.
We do. We may never know the full story, but we could try to understand what they're going through.
So what do you think is the best possible outcome for Baim and Paula?
Ideally, I hope they can find a way to move forward with grace and prioritize their children.
Put the kids first.
Exactly. And hopefully they can find a way to co-parent effectively.
So even though their relationship is ending, their kids can still have a stable environment.
That's the hope. And it's a reminder that even in divorce, there's still hope for healing and growth.
That's a good point. So as we wrap up this part, I'm left with a feeling of intrigue, but also empathy.
Me too. Intrigue because of how complex this case is, and empathy because of what these two are going through.
All right, folks, we've covered a lot in this part.
We have. We talked about culture, legal strategies, and the bigger implications of this divorce.
And in our final part, we'll step back and reflect on the key takeaways.
We'll consider what this case tells us about Indonesia, celebrity culture, and relationships in the digital age.
Stay tuned for part 3. All right, welcome back to the last part of our deep dive.
Part 3.
I don't know about you, but after all this, I feel like we've been through a whirlwind.
Oh, tell me about it. From the courtroom to, Indonesian culture. It's been a lot.
It has. And it really hit me that this case is like a mini version of Indonesia itself.
What do you mean?
Well, it's like we're seeing tradition and modern life clashing right there in front of us.
Yeah, I see that you have this culture that's all about families sticking together.
Right. Unity, harmony.
But then you have social media, globalization, all these things changing how people view relationship.
Exactly. And it's super interesting to see how those forces are playing out in this divorce.
Social media is really adding fuel to the fire, isn't it?
Yeah. It is. Everyone's got an opinion and they're sharing it.
It's like the whole country's gossiping about this, analyzing every little thing.
I can't even imagine what that must be like for Baim and Paula.
Oh, it's got to be brutal, having your personal life dissected like that.
It's like their pain is public entertainment.
It is, and it really shows the dark side of fame, especially in a place like Indonesia.
Where image is everything.
Exactly. So we've got this clash of values, the media frenzy, the intense scrutiny. But what does it all mean?
Yeah, what are the bigger lessons here? What does this tell us about relationships, about fame, about Indonesia?
Well, I think it reminds us that no relationship is perfect.
Right. We see these perfect pictures online, and we forget that everyone has problems.
And sometimes those problems explode in a very public way.
Like this divorce, it's shattering that illusion of perfection.
It is. It shows us that celebrities are just people with flaws and struggles like everyone else.
And it shows the price of fame.
That's a good point. You get the wealth and recognition, but you lose your privacy.
You're always under a microscope.
Exactly. And this case also shows how social media is changing how we do relationships.
It's true. There are new ways to connect, but also new ways to get hurt.
And new ways for things to get very public, very fast.
This case is like a textbook example of how social media shapes public opinion.
It's powerful stuff, but it can be dangerous too.
It makes you think about the long-term effects of all this.
It does. Like, how is this affecting our relationships, our privacy, our empathy?
So many questions. And this deep dive, while we learned a lot, also raised even more.
It always does, doesn't it?
It makes me want to learn even more about Indonesia, its culture, its people.
Me too. And that's the beauty of these deep dives.
It's not just about the information.
It's about sparking that curiosity, wanting to explore more.
To see the world in a new way.
Exactly. So as we wrap this up, I just feel grateful for this chance to learn and discuss.
Me too, and I hope our listeners feel the same.
You hope you keep exploring this topic, keep asking questions.
And maybe even take your own deep dive into something that interests you.
The world is full of stories, just waiting to be discovered.
That's a great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, keep diving deep.